My name is Becky, and I am here with the Jedi Master himself, Yoda, Mr. Steve Cockrum. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. You didn't tell me you were Rey. Everyone who appears on the show has to have a character in Star Wars, and I thought that Rey was probably the most appropriate for you. I've had all kinds of rude things suggested for me, but I guess Yoda's the best we've come up with so far. So, thank you very much.
I'll take Rey. She balances the Force out, so I feel like that's a good sign. Awesome. Okay, Steve, tell me a little bit about what's been going on in your world this week. What's live? What's exciting? What's happening?
You always ask that, and I've never got anything more exciting really than we're still in lockdown here in sunny London. What's been good? Do you know, it's a really good question. I lost my golf match. That's the really bad news of the week. So that's it. I'm now out. I lost in the semi-final. So yeah, that's a bit depressing. But apart from that, it's been really nice. I had a couple quieter evenings. Took my wife out for a date last night. So, you know, always thinking, if I've got to speak about extended family and how to do parenting well, I feel like I'm on show now. So I've been trying to do it as good a job as possible with my children on the grounds that people now meet me and go, so you're the guru on parenting. And Helen just laughed. So that's the fun bit. There we go.
Particularly well-timed episodes where in-laws have just come around as well, which is chance for you to get many more there.
Yeah. They can't hear through the door. They'll have to watch it live.
Yeah. The other exciting thing is I heard you got some new walking boots this week.
Yes. I've got new walking boots and I've got new coats as well. So it's that time of year in England where things are getting a bit colder. And I go shopping apparently about twice a year because I hate shopping. And Helen says I become a moody, spoilt child because I don't want to try anything on. I get hot, and in the new world, you've got to wear masks everywhere. And I don't like masks. So I came home, though, the proud owner from Mountain Warehouse with a winter coat, which I know you like and have insisted that you want to steal for you. But I have some premium walking boots, which probably will do less walking than the average pair of premium walking boots. But I'm at an age now where if I'm going to have something, I would like the very best that money can buy. So there we go. I have now Mountain Extreme. Apparently, I've still got to do the effort and walk. But apart from that, they should do pretty much everything else.
Yeah, hopefully just find some good mountains to climb. The highest mountain in Wales has a train to the top. So you could even, the train to the top, act like you've actually made it all the way up the mountain and then break a sweat. It was hard work.
But I think the Welsh have locked the borders again, haven't they? It's not quite as bad as the Scots that have built a wall and put the pitchforks on it. But apparently with COVID, everybody's competing in the British Isles at the moment is who can be the most ruthless on lockdown. I think the Irish are winning at the moment. So, I think they'll be rationing oxygen before long. It's all a bit ridiculous, but there we go.
We are thankfully, both of us, in a tier 1 area, which is the lowest it can be in the UK. So we still have some amounts of freedom compared to other areas. So we're really relishing those moments before we may go into a national lockdown, which everyone's really hoping not to. Anyway, okay. So today we are talking about extended family. Give us an overview as to how you want the show to work and how you want viewers to engage.
So in a perfect world, as some of you have been doing, you've been writing in your scenarios and questions. We'd rather deal with what's live. We've been doing this series on parenting, and extended family is probably the last, unless somebody comes up with a request this week, which causes us to do it differently. But I think the question for me is, what would you like us to talk about? If you're listening live and you want to ask questions, we'd rather make it applicable. And if you're watching and recording, as I know a lot of you are, or listening as a podcast, then basically we'd love feedback from you. We'd love what's helpful. And we'd happily change the names of the innocent to protect you. But if there are things you'd like wisdom on, we're happy to do that as well. So the more engaged you are, the easier it is to pull, as I say, on the unconscious competence. Because if I just talk for 25 minutes, you get the best I have, but it isn't necessarily always the best you need.
Love it. There you go, folks. Please do post any questions you have for Steve in the box on anything related to personality. We can occasionally deal with live questions as well. Today, as Steve helpfully reminded us, we are talking about extended family and the role of personality in that, and shedding some light on that area. So to kick us off, Steve, how do I know what voices different members of my family are? How do I know the personality type, and why is that important?
So I think that I almost want to say I'll refer you to the various other podcasts we've done in this series where I've tried to describe the characteristics or attributes of the different foundational voices. So it's not an exact science. I mean, you've heard me say before, you can't guarantee that just because you see a behavior, that's who that person is. But you will get it right more often than not if you've learned to recognize the traits and tendencies and behaviors that different foundational voices have, and actually begin to relate to them in that way. So extended family for me is as much about personality, but it's also about making sure that you are positioning the relationship in the right way and recognizing that extended family plays different roles in the lives of the children that you raise, or even in the relationships of your family.
So in terms of extended family, clarify a bit what you mean by that and why it's important in parenting.
Yeah, so I think that I think the Africans had it right with the prophet that said it takes a village to raise a child. So I'm a great believer that actually, if you look at human history, we always tend to assume that the bit we're here for is the most important, and therefore what's happening here must be true. But nuclear family, i.e. biological mum and dad with biological kids, unit of 2.4 kids or whatever we have on average now, is a relatively new construct for trying to raise great kids. In fact, you can say it's probably a product of the 20th century. I think that basically people stopped going back home. They went off to university or they went to war originally, and a lot of them died. So you ended up with whole villages where the men didn't come home from war. And you began to see this kind of atomization of really the community you grew up in was the community you lived in, the community you worked in. So people went off to work, or they went off to war, or they went to university, or they went to study, and they didn't come home. And so therefore you have this realization that a lot of people now live, even those who have a nuclear family, are usually not living where their parents are, or they're not living near the extended networks of support. So for me, extended family is both a biological and a non-biological reality. It's more the network of relationships that basically orbit your family in a way that actually serves the purposes of being able to invest in your children in a way that you can't always do yourself. So I'm a massive proponent of extended family because I've seen the benefits so many times, and I just watch the benefit children have when they have uncles, aunts, friends, inspirational role models, superstars, because in the end, there's certain roles that you have to play as a parent that involve a degree of discipline and a degree of structure. You can't always be the hero of the story in the moment, because support and challenge is not always going to be popular. So that's what I mean by extended family, probably somewhere between the 20 to 40 relationships, some of which might be biological relatives, some of which are just shared relationships. But what you're doing is you're intentionally building a network around your nuclear family with your children that actually is something that is going to make parenting a lot easier to do. How does that sound?
Yeah, it sounds great. So for those people like me and my husband who are not living near our family, we probably live about 2 hours away, which for UK standards is a long way. And I was like, oh no, if you're more than 20 minutes, that is too far to travel. I know Americans have a different concept of distance. But if we're not living near our biological family, how do you build an extended family? Do you have any tips on that?
I think when you're young, free and single, or young, free and married like you guys are, as double incomes, no kids yet, then in some senses it's less of an issue. The moment you have a baby, you will realize that actually it's an awful lot for two people to take care of while they also try and balance all the demands of life. So in some senses, the extended family is almost a luxury until you actually have children, and then it becomes a necessity. So there is the orbit of the grandparents. But what I would say is the friendship networks you build, that actually when you go through those early years of just survival, then you get to the point of going, how do we begin to invest in, grow? How, for me, do we create ways in which the kids can see people who are potentially role models to them? I mean, I have 3 amazing girls. I've almost realized they don't necessarily need lots of incredible male role models because they obviously have their father. I'm joking. But what they want is they want to understand, what could I be as a woman in the 21st century? So for me, I've used the fact that my work has allowed me to invest in some incredible people, and I always bring them to the home. So the girls get to meet people who are TV stars, political stars, business, and because I've been kind to them, usually they repay that by being amazingly inspirational to my children. So sometimes the extended family is people who are close, but others, I would say, it's the network of relationships that really are all adding to the richness of the experience of your children. So Becky, I mean, let's be clear here. So Ray and her husband Tim are very much part of our extended family. My girls think Bex is like a rock star. I mean, she is everything that they want to be when they grow up. And so therefore, you being in their lives, you being in our home often and being around, is basically showing them an inspirational figure, but you're actually quite present in their lives, and they love you, and the dog loves you. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of like I'm using you basically to make up for my parenting deficiency, because my children all the time going, I love who you are. So that's an intentional process. So hospitality is both a joy, but it's also a very intentional strategy of going, how do the people that my children meet both challenge them, perhaps meeting people that don't have all the opportunities they do, but how do some of those inspirational people go, why is it that, you know, Megan's already decided she wants to go to Oxford to read law, wants to be a barrister, wants to be the Prime Minister? Well, that's because she's been around people all her life who've gone, Megs, you can do whatever you want. Izzy's starting her own business at the moment. You know, Charlie, goodness only knows what Charlie will want to do, but whatever it is, I'm sure she'll be fine. Because all the role models have always been a mixture of just loving, consistent support and inspirational challenge, but also calibrated to the fact that we know what they are by wiring. So therefore, we're actually able to go, you know, if you've got a nurturer as a child, forcing them to compete for your affection or prizes at school is not really going to be the most loving thing for them, because they challenge themselves enough. Whereas you've got pioneering children, like, you know, so Charlotte is an ENTP or a pioneer connector like you and I. Charlie is naturally lazy. She'll do the minimum to get by unless she's really motivated by it. So make it a competition so that Charlie can win, and all of a sudden she's highly motivated. So that kind of bigger picture context where you don't have it all on you as parents, I would say is just a really, really significant strategy of building the children, lightening the load. You've always got people that want to come and babysit or childmind or whatever it might be, because that extended family dynamic, particularly if you feed them well, you'll never struggle for having people in your home if you feed younger adults who are probably struggling with a little less resource than you have. Bex is laughing because I reckon you must eat at least three lunches a week in my house.
Yeah, I think I actually was around for lunch 3 times this week. We have the best meetings over lunch. That's all I'm going to say. And Steve is actually a very good cook, for those of you who wouldn't believe that. Particularly good at omelets, speciality there. Okay, so that's kind of like the utopian vision for how you do family. I kind of want to get into the nitty gritty around, I guess, personality clashes with extended family. So we've got some really good questions here that people have written in around. So I'm going to start with this one from Kelly. So she says, my mother-in-law refuses to stop being the mother to her husband or continuing mothering him. What do you have any advice for that?
Yes. So extended family is a great concept because then it deals with human beings and all the insecurities they have. So one of the most common ones, Kelly, is the fact that basically mothers who have defined their identity often through the raising of their children actually find it quite hard to relate to their son or daughter when actually they are no longer the primary relationship in their life. So it's not uncommon for mums or even fathers to continue treating their children as if they are still their children. And that's, you know, something called transactional analysis has been really helpful for me in this, and particularly when you're helping people. Think of 3 ways. So you've got parent, adult, child as 3 dynamics on one side, and parent, adult, child on the other. So when you're parenting children, remember the square from last week, there's 18 years where you get to, in many ways, imbibe all the things that hopefully the kids need to make good decisions. You are the parent and they are the child. There's nothing worse than a parent who's decided they're hyper cool and they've got a 9-year-old and they're trying to have an adult relationship. It's actually not helpful to the child at all because there's not appropriate boundaries. But what happens, you see, over time is that when the child grows up and begins to leave home, let alone gets married, you will look at your child and you still see the 5-year-old who used to sit on your knee and let you read stories. But the reality is they're now a 23-year-old or 24-year-old grown up in the world's eyes. And you have to learn as a parent to move from being a parent-child around the apprenticeship square to being an adult relationship with honor. So therefore, actually, when mother-in-law is refusing to stop being mother, the key is to talk to your husband. Because in the end, the issue is that he is probably living in an old paradigm, which is quite convenient because mothers tend to buy things for you, do things for you, care for you. But actually what you're really trying to do is you're trying to say, how do you move, particularly when you're getting married or got married or in a partnership, how do we move to being an adult relationship? And so many parents, Bex, even when their child is 45 and the parents are 65, still treat them as if they were 12 years old. Interestingly, that happens, by the way, and this is me geeking off on transaction analysis, I love it. What usually happens is if the parent refuses to move to adult and tries to parent the child forever, eventually the child reverses the polarity. They play the role of the parent and they then start treating their elderly parent like a child. None of which is what we really want. Extended family will always work best when actually you allow the transition and you allow the adult dynamic with honor. So, you know, I talk to my parents, but fundamentally my primary relationship is with Helen, my wife, and vice versa. And that's the difference. When it doesn't work, by the way, it gets stuck and it all becomes a little bit awkward. And we're in this bizarre relational dynamics of nobody really challenges them on it, but fundamentally it's causing tension and unhelpfulness.
Awesome. Just riffing off that point, I want to add in another mother-in-law question because I feel this one's really relevant and we'll actually tie into it. So Alice says, my mother-in-law is a nurturer creative and she's a pioneer connector. How can they see eye to eye and how can they have a really healthy relationship?
Well, I think, Alice, the fact that you know your own wiring and you know your mother-in-law's wiring is a first step. So if you think about it, they're looking at the world through very different lenses. So a nurturer creative is an ISFP. They are the most incarnational, caring, compassionate, empathetic people who are very, very immediate in their practical care and desire to make a difference. The pioneer connector, of course, wants to change the whole world. And as a woman, Alice, being a pioneer connector, no one in the female species, or very few of them, will truly understand why you are not the way they are. So every pioneer woman will deal with the fact that they tend to get on with men often more easily than they do with women because they're task orientated and visionary future rather than the compassionate, empathetic, caring. So I think what I'd say, Alice, is to go actually have the conversation and be honest and ask, how can we work together? Where are the tensions? And potentially ask the question, which is why we love to support the Challenge Matrix, which is to go, how do I be a really good daughter-in-law to you and how do we build our relationship when we actually look at the world through completely different lenses? I'd often say, Alice, challenge for you is learn to see the world through the eyes of the nurturer creative. Do that on the Giant TV, watch a bit of their series, learn to celebrate what they bring at their best and learn to create environments where they can bring that and you invite them to bring that into your family because they care amazingly. And hope that, Alice, that she will do the same thing and go, you know, if you want to find out about me, here's a video series on Giant that you can watch, which will help you understand that I'm not some person that is from an alien planet. I'm just wired differently to you. So, Alice, I admire you asking the question. And in some senses, just be aware the power of your voice You carry a grenade launcher, and in the end, you will be more intimidating to your mother-in-law than you realize, even if she carries a positional title of mother-in-law.
That is so helpful. I particularly love that advice that you gave around asking her, as in like, how can we develop this relationship? What's like how, and just taking the time to, I guess, see their world. I think that's so being intentional around that makes such a difference. Just having these honest conversations. Okay, so now we're moving on to some different questions that people have written in from. So I love this one from John. So he's asking, I come from a very extroverted family culture and his wife's family are very introverted. Do you have any tips in dealing with this?
Well, firstly, John, the fact you've recognized that is progress. So what we're doing, if you think about it, is we're giving you tools and lenses to understand that people that are different to you are not weird or deliberately annoying you. They have a different superpower or a different way, in this case, of recharging in the world. So when you come from a different place, it feels awkward and strange, because when you go to your wife's home, it's probably a lot quieter. There's not 24-hour entertainment. People will probably sit and read books for extended periods of time, or they might go for a walk. And if you are an extrovert in an extrovert culture, of course, you don't realize how much oxygen comes from that. So in terms of tips, what I would say this is, we have a tool called the boomerang effect in Giant, which says, seek first to understand before trying to be understood. So be interested before trying to be interesting. So the amazing thing is, introverts are incredibly interesting people. And actually, if you can become a depth friend with them, you see a completely different side. Most introverts don't really think extroverts take the time to listen. What they do is they ask a question, they get bored waiting for a response, so they just fill up the conversation. And most introverts in the end go like, well, I'm not going to bother trying to answer your questions, John, because you don't ever appear to truly give me the space to think and listen. So all I'd say is learn to honor the introvert culture, John, and when they believe that you are really committed to honoring their preference and their way of engaging with the world and their way of communicating, you'll find that as depth, relationship, and trust grows, they actually become more extrovert in the way they engage with you, because you become one of the depth relationships that they trust. So that's the key, but it will take a little bit longer, John, than you would normally want it to with your extrovert charisma, because introverts are not easily fooled, and they're not easily given to go, well, just because you tell me you're lovely, I will probably need to see you are really able to flex your style and actually honor the way I communicate, learn, and engage with the world. And then you'll find that you get admitted into the inner circle of an introvert's world. And all of a sudden you go, wow, you're a lot more interesting than I thought you were. And wow, you are really fun to be with. And do you know, you're quite gregarious and funny. And most extroverts go, why don't you be like that the rest of the time? Then everyone would like you. And most introverts are like, oh, it's worse than I thought. You really haven't quite understood. I don't need lots of people. What I need is depth and authenticity. And I don't give myself away easily to people who I don't think really honor or listen, or actually are prepared to try and be interested in me before they try and tell me how interesting they are and all the things that are going on in their particular part of life.
Yeah,
that makes sense?
That's so fascinating, because I guess also the challenge applies the other way around. So if it was an introvert coming into John's family, the very extroverted family, there would also be challenges around engaging with that. What would you recommend if it was vice versa?
Same principle, honor the culture you're going into. So, you know, whenever you go to a different culture, try and understand what is going on around you. I mean, I often say, as a Brit, I lived in the States for 5 years. I had friends who came over who were always being rude about American culture. It was like, I have no idea why you would ever think that's a way to be endeared, because in the end, most people like to feel that you appreciate who you are and the culture you've created. So if you're an introvert who going into extrovert culture, don't see it as a negative. See it as an opportunity to learn and grow, and recognize there will be time in the extrovert culture where you've given everything you have, and you just say, guys, I just need to go for a walk, or do you know, it's probably time for my afternoon sleep, or I'm going to read a book right now, if that's okay. And it's basically honoring the host culture. Once the host feels honored that you are choosing to engage and recognize, even if that means playing more games than you perhaps would want to, or staying up a bit later than you would like to, telling stories and drinking whiskey or whatever it might be, the moment they know that you approve of their culture, they will extend far greater grace when you say, do you know, I love the fact that this is a place that is always on. You guys are so extroverted. It's always fun. It's always engaging. But do you know, I'm a little introvert, and occasionally I'm going to need to recharge my batteries. So please don't think I don't love you. Please don't think I'm being rude. It's just that we're wired differently. And if you really want to understand, there's a video on Giant TV that you can listen to where Steve will explain everything you need to know about introverts, but we're afraid to ask.
I love that. It's so helpful having the language and vocabulary around it to understand each other. I come from a family of 6, and we're all extroverts besides one of my brothers. We only really found out that he was an introvert at age 25. And I know, it faked it that long. And a couple of Christmases ago, it got to like 11:30 p.m. He was like, guys, I think I just need some introvert time. And we were like, go for your life. Like, really glad you asked. And everyone's understood that he was taking himself off to have that time. And it was so helpful just to be on the same page around that. Yeah, so, where I was coming from. It was so great. I was like, I'm so liberated in that. That is really helpful. Okay, next question is an interesting one. So this is from Mary, and it's all around, what do you do if your husband's family, or we could, easily interchange for wife's family or partner's family, don't accept you because you're not from the right ethnicity or faith?
Wow.
It's a big one. Biggie.
This is so generalizations will never do justice to the specific context in which you're coming from, Mary. So I offer this with open hands, saying, take it, leave it for what it is. The hardest thing in the world is to actually, when you are entering into a marriage where you're choosing to give yourself to someone else, and to find, for whatever reason, that the extended family does not actually accept you because of who you are, but actually something you can do nothing about. You can't actually change your ethnicity. And I think it's one of those ones where you have to allow your husband, Mary, to be the champion for you, because it may mean that your husband actually has to have a adult conversation with his parents, because in the end, as many of you all know, I guess I still am a pastor. I used to marry people, and in marriage prep, there was always this moment where you said to people, you realize you are leaving your father and mother. However wonderful that home is, you have to leave. And the language of the ceremony was, you cleave to another. So you actually leave and you create a new identity, a new family, a new reality, and that is your primary place of belonging. So if I'm Mary's husband, in the end, if my parents do not accept Mary, then I'm going to choose Mary over them. Now, that sounds rather dramatic, because what you usually find is they're treating you like a parent child and they haven't grown into an adult. So the conversation is this: Mum and Dad, I love the fact you're from wherever it is. I love the fact that we have that identity. But, I've chosen to invite Mary to be my wife. And in the end, if you want to have a significant relationship with me going forward, it's going to be because you managed to make Mary feel welcome too. So she may be of a different race, ethnicity, faith, but fundamentally, I've chosen her. So if you want to be with me, then you're going to have to accept that. And I've known situations where the support and challenge is literally going, if you want to have time in our home, if you want us to visit you, I am not coming if Mary is going to be in tears at the end of it because you've not accepted her. So you can choose. I would much rather we move to an adult relationship, but I'm not going to have my wife, or vice versa, husband, upset and hurt because you effectively are refusing to play adult in that. Now, for a time, they may call your bluff, because most parents think the children will do what they're told eventually. You may just have to say, I love you. We will meet, but we will meet for coffee, or we'll meet out somewhere, because we're not actually coming to your home, or you're not coming to our home, or we're not bringing the grandchildren into your home, while actually this is something we deal with. Now, what you'll usually find is the people are not deliberately doing it, but they're doing it without realizing it. So when you actually bring the challenge and say, I want us to have an adult relationship, but in the end, if I'm Mary's husband, I'm choosing Mary, and I will choose her happiness over my parents if they force me to choose. The moment Mary knows that, she will be more than capable of dealing with the challenges of dealing with my parents, if that makes sense. Is that any good, Bex?
100%, because I guess it feels like you're not doing it alone. You're not facing the challenges, you're facing it as a team, which is so important. Okay.
The worst case scenario, Bex, is if Mary actually thinks her husband would probably choose the family over her. Yeah. That is a serious issue, because then that actually is eroding the trust in that key covenantal relationship as well. So there we go. Great question, Mary. And I'm sorry if you're having to deal with that, but sadly you are not alone. It's a very, very common thing that, you know, if you are basically old enough now to be a parent whose children have grown up and have got married and have their own partners and have their own kids, you just have to understand, how do you, being an adult, actually make that relationship richer? Because you're parenting that square, that first 18 years, you've had all the time you're going to have in that particular dynamic. Whatever you put in is what you've got at that stage. And actually regretting it or trying to force them back into where you are in control. And that's why for a lot of people, the dynamics of, you know, young people just don't have enough economic freedom at the moment sometimes to be able to choose to be independent. So we have these slightly strange, complex dynamics where parents are effectively exerting a parental control because of money, or even because the newlywed or the couple that are coming back to live with them. If you are in that position, just be so careful as the grown-ups, as it were, the in-laws, the parents, because actually adult relationship is such a gift with your children, and it opens the door to an incredible opportunity with your grandchildren if you get it right.
Just playing on that piece a little bit, you mentioned that it'll be a real problem for Mary if her husband doesn't see it that way, and if he's backing his parents. What would you recommend she do then? What tips would you have there? I really threw the bus there. I'm sorry.
I think that so again, asking good questions to check that your husband understands. So go out somewhere neutral, somewhere they can't run away. Over dinner is always good. People have to put their weapons down to eat, and just ask the question: are you aware of how I feel in the dynamic of that relationship? So it's really trying to make sure, rather than assuming that he knows he's doing that and he's being consciously, you know, horrible to you, always work on the assumption that probably there is unconscious incompetence. So rather than escalating the challenge of you either choose me or you choose your parents, when the person's going, I've no idea what you're talking about, actually take the time to just explain and go, this is how it sometimes feels for me. And I want to make sure that you are aware. So please ask the clarifying questions to make sure you've understood what I'm saying, because I want to make sure that I've fully communicated the challenge that I'm having. You'll be amazed if you go in with that posture. It's usually, if it's the male particularly, there is unconscious incompetence. They just don't see it. They don't understand. And the adult relationship, let them watch this episode. Learning how to be adult in your marriage and learning how to be adult with the extended family and parents is such an important part of growing up and maturity. And, you know, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for environments where actually you get to be at your best, where you honor the people that are in your family and recognize that actually that extended family of both biological and non-biological relationships is such an incredible environment to actually raise great children, because it's really, really hard to do it just as one or two people. I mean, you know, I say if you look at the success rate of nuclear families, you know, if we were producing a product as a business where roughly 1 in 2 or 50% of the product failed, we would assume that there was something wrong with the design. So the reason why I think we see so much marriage breakdown in the world, North America, certainly in Britain as well, is because we've lost the concept that it takes a village to raise a child. And if you haven't got your biological relatives living all around you, which you probably don't anymore, be intentional at gathering the people who you believe can play that role. You may have to play it in their family's role as well. So in some ways, you believe it, there's even some families, Bex, where I'm the cool one. You know, hard to believe, I know, but it's like allow the fact that different people can play different roles in the lives of your children, and that actually you don't have to be so strict if you're a grandparent or an uncle or a friend. You can actually be cool and encourage them sometimes to do reckless things that you don't get to do when you're the parent and you're taking them around that square.
I love it. Okay, I know we're slightly out of time, but I want to squeeze in one last question so you can answer really quickly. Jared says, how can you make sure that all family members feel included at a family gathering, regardless of their personality type?
Again, Jared, the fact you're asking the question means you're halfway there.
Yeah.
So the question is to go, most people, if they're unconsciously incompetent, create environments that they would most love to live in. So you'll find that if a pioneer connector, which is Ray and I, if we're accidental, then the party will feel, or the gathering will feel amazing if you're a pioneer or a connector. It might not if you're a nurturer or a guardian or a creative. So the question you want to ask is, I would look at, find representatives of each foundational voice in your family. So get them to take the 5 voices assessment, actually, as it were, build almost what a counselor reference and say, okay, this is what we're thinking of doing. Does this sound like fun? Would this feel like you were included? And if the nurture, so for me as a pioneer connector, if the nurturers, the guardians, and the creatives go, Steve, that's a great idea, I'd love to be part of that, then I know I'm in the clear. If they wince and go, oh my goodness, that sounds horrendous, then what I do is I'll often work with them to go, how could we make it something that everyone feels truly heard, valued, and appreciated? So the fact you're asking the question, you're halfway there, Jed. Find some representatives who represent each foundational voice and actually work at creating the experience together.
Just to add on that, the rules of engagement is incredibly helpful within a family context as well. Rules of engagement, for those of you who don't know, is one of the giant tools. So there's a whole series about that on the platform. We used it as a family to decide what we wanted to do for Christmas last year, and it worked incredibly well. Rather than me and my mum as pioneer connectors just deciding what we were going to do and everyone played ball, we really had this big family discussion, and the nurturers went first and everyone's voices felt heard, and we came to this really healthy conclusion where everyone's like, yeah, that's what I want to do, that's the family gathering that I want this year, and was able to get really excited about that, which was awesome. Yeah, so please do use those. We are coming to a close, but we would love to hear your thoughts on any topics, questions, or scenarios you'd love us to cover in Personality Yoda. So please do send those to us throughout the week on the email address below on the screen, personalityyoda@giantworldwide.com. Steve, any final thoughts from you? Any last wishes or last ideas?
There's a strange idea that came to me, Bex, was that basically if lockdown continues, every extra is going to learn how to do an introvert Christmas this year, with 6 people being the maximum we're allowed. So maybe it's a growth opportunity for the extroverts, which probably is not a bad thing. They tend to dominate things if they're not careful.
Yeah, that's such a good way of looking at it. Being a P, we haven't even thought about Christmas this year because we're like, who knows what's going to happen with lockdown, and we're just going to have to go with the flow. But 6 people sounds like a small amount for an extroverted family, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for your amazing advice there, Steve. That's incredibly helpful. We will be here same time, same place next Friday, 3 p.m. UK time and morning time US, depending on where you are in the States. Have a fantastic week, and we will see you same time next week. Bye.